Showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day again as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England, but some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alastair Stewart. Coming up on the programme, Christmas parties are on, unless they're off. And if they're on, don't go without taking a test, and don't snog. Ministers and their crystal clear messaging on the season's festivities. CLOWNGATE. Macron says the PM's a clown, a knucklehead and a vulgarian. The French president's latest contribution to the entente cordiale with Boris Johnson, having already said, "You cannot be serious." And from the Maldives to Loch Lomond, the story of a rescued and now very happy turtle. All of that coming up, but first, a news update. Here's Karen.
Thank you, Alastair. Your news at 8 o'clock. A stepmother and father have been convicted of killing his 6-year-old son after subjecting him to a campaign of abuse. Emma Tustin was unanimously convicted of the murder of Arthur Labinjo Hughes at Coventry Crown Court. Her partner and Arthur's father, Thomas Hughes, was found guilty of manslaughter. The trial heard that Arthur was beaten, starved, poisoned and suffered 130 separate injuries. He died of a brain injury in June last year. A former aide to Prince Charles has been found to have played a part in a cash for honours scandal. An independent investigation reveals Michael Fawcett coordinated with fixers to offer a knighthood and British citizenship to a donor of the Prince's foundation. He was also involved in directing money from a Saudi billionaire to another charity which Charles was patron of. A new COVID antibody treatment has been approved after clinical trials found Xevudy cut hospital admissions and deaths by 79%. The government has also secured 114 million jabs for booster campaigns over the next 2 years. As Boris Johnson received his booster jab today, he reassured everyone to continue as normal within the new measures.
The most important thing is that people should follow the guidance we've set out, and people shouldn't be cancelling things, and there's no need for that at all. That's not in what we're saying. What we're doing is trying to respond in a balanced and a proportionate way to the arrival of the Omicron variant.
More than 100 military personnel are being deployed to Aberdeenshire to help people affected by Storm Arwen. Nearly 20,000 homes are still without power a week after the storm hit the UK. The military will check on the welfare of those struggling without electricity. The UK, the European Union and the United States have hit Belarus with multiple coordinated sanctions. The EU says it's targeting the measures, such as travel bans and asset freezes, at those accused of taking part in a hybrid attack on the bloc. Belarus have been accused of human rights abuses by using migrants as a political tool. The Mail on Sunday is considering escalating its appeal to the Supreme Court after it lost the latest stage of a privacy battle with the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan sued the paper for publishing a personal and private letter to her father. She won her case earlier this year when a High Court judge ruled in her favour not to go to full trial. And she won again today when the publisher lost an appeal against that decision. The Duchess says her victory proves that the paper broke the law. You are right up to date now. Back to Alastair.
Thanks, Karen. Now, you heard Karen talk about our top story in her news bulletin and heard Boris Johnson talking about just do the right thing at Christmas. But this evening, I have a real problem with that old mantra, do as I say, not as I do. It is an anthem to hypocrisy, to having one's cake and eating it, to all the rest of the one rule for them and another for us stuff. It's in the headlines because of the row over an alleged Downing Street Christmas party nearly a year ago. And that row rumbles on. Oddly, however, that is not what worries me most this evening. What worries me most is that right now there are profoundly mixed messages on both the do as I say and the do as I do fronts. And I, for one, am a tad confused. Business and Science Minister George Freeman's declared his business department will not be having a Christmas party. He said big companies might follow their lead, as gatherings of 100 or more might be an unnecessary risk. His close group of advisers, however, will be toasting one another on Zoom. Let's take a listen.
I can tell you that, my parliamentary team and I normally have a Christmas party. We've decided this year it's probably sensible to do it by Zoom and wait for the spring.
And do remember that George is one of the people who looks after business, including hospitality, and also holds the science brief, a subject on which he's pretty knowledgeable. But the Health and Care Secretary, Sajid Javid, the man responsible for the NHS and ultimately our well-being, said there was no need to cancel parties. It might be wise, however, to test oneself before attending. Here's what he said.
I don't think people need to change their plans. I think that the guidance that is already out there, which we published a few weeks back, the so-called sort of Plan A, which carries guidance around days as they get darker and colder. We know the virus likes that kind of weather, and so we should just always all be a bit cautious. It might be sensible, for example, depending on the type of party you're going to and the setting, to take a LFD test before you go.
And last night, Theresa Coffey, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, on the subject of office parties, has said there shouldn't be too much snogging under the mistletoe, which rather suggests that she thinks parties will go ahead. And here she is.
Who are you with? Jenny Harris, who says we've got to be cautious when it comes to socialising at Christmas, or the government that says don't change your party plans?
Well, for what it's worth, I don't think there should be much snogging under the mistletoe. You don't need to do things like that.
Gotta love Therese. Now, number 10 Downing Street, as you heard in Karen's bulletin, said there is no ban on Christmas parties, nor, it would seem, on interpretations of that edict. Looking at what just 3 ministers have said, you might conclude that there is a sort of ban, or there should be, or that there shouldn't be, but you should get tested before attending, or if you do attend, well, don't get too frisky. It's almost funny, but not quite. We're nearly 2 years into a pandemic which has claimed 145,000 lives and caused pain, distress and depression to many more. Another strain of the virus, Omicron, has just hit us and is still being profiled for just how infectious, dangerous, even deadly it might be. The government's embarked on a costly and urgent campaign to persuade us to get a booster jab, and has just spent millions more of your money and mine on yet more jabs to see us through to next summer. These are not the signs of a government that thinks it'll all be over by Christmas. So you'd have thought that ministers' collective message on Christmas parties would be crystal clear and clinically watertight. Christmas parties involve for many judgment-impeding booze, dance-provoking music, nibbles that all may grab with ungloved fingers, one after another, and a general atmosphere that may tempt even the Puritans attending to indulge in, as Theresa put it, a quick snog. It has, as they say, all the markings of a mighty mess. I suspect that what is at stake, once again, is that philosophical schism at the heart of this government, the split between those who believe there is no infringement of civil liberties in asking folk to wear masks, get jabbed and keep 2 meters apart, and those, the more libertarian, who hate the very idea of a Tory government telling the people what to do. Now, as it happens, I'm slightly more with the first group than the second, unlike several of my fellow GBNews presenters, but that isn't the point. If the pandemic is still for many a matter of life and death, then ministers should sort out the line and stick to it. If the new variant of the virus has a halfway decent chance of infecting tens of thousands more and hospitalising many of them, then it really does matter, especially in the run-up to the ever-tricky winter months. It all demands that ministers arrive at a clear policy position, adhere to it, and promote it collectively. The Prime Minister himself implied that they had. Jenny Harries, head of the UK Health Security Agency, urged caution this Christmas. Keep apart. Remain cautious. She was overruled. Advisers advise, the Prime Minister reminded us. Ministers decide. Fine. But here's a thought, Prime Minister. Do remind us clearly what you have decided, and then tell all of your ministers what it is. As things stand, it's more of a lucky dip than a clear and consistent policy. Joining me now is Joey Jones, Theresa May's former spokesman and himself a political journalist. Joey, great to see you and thank you very much for joining us. Is this another example of a dysfunctional number 10 machine or ministers freelancing?
I think that ministers, in a way, have to freelance because they're being asked questions about issues where there are not clear answers, as you've articulated yourself there, Alastair. The rules that have been laid out, that have been strengthened, obviously, in response to this variant, they don't cover specific areas where one can interpret the rules around Christmas parties and kissing under the mistletoe and so on and so forth. So actually, I mean, I think the government is making its life harder for itself than it need to around all of these issues, because, as you say, I think that ministers should look to Downing Street and the communications representatives there for a firm line. But in the absence of that, I do have some sympathy for them because they're being asked a straight question. They, as you rightly say, are probably on a spectrum within emphasising the need for economic activity within the run-up to Christmas, which is so critical for many shops and hospitality businesses, and emphasising the need for caution with the variant encroaching. And so in that regard, I don't think it's any surprise, really, that you should have a recipe for some confusion.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Joey, that when I put on my Twitter feed that you and I were going to be chatting about this, an awful lot of people said they'll make their own minds up, thank you very much indeed. We don't need guidance from the government. I can understand that, but down the road, that's a real problem if things get a lot worse for ministers who then have to say, do this or be damned.
Well, I guess, look, I mean, I'm, if you like, as you say, a former journalist and communications specialist. My role would be to say to the government, look, you need to be clearer about what is rules and to really entrench an understanding of why those rules are there and what they're supposed to establish. And then beyond that, where people have range for their own interpretation and using their common sense, if you like. Beyond that, I think that all of us as individuals will have a view on whether or not the rules are sufficiently robust. But really, we will only know that, only the scientists would be able to give an authoritative view on that right now. My own view is that they probably don't go far enough, and actually all of us could do with some stronger guidance about social distancing and the use of masks in beyond shops and public transport, but the government has decided not to do that. So if I were a government minister going out to do an interview, I would try to stick very closely to where the government has been clear, and not, as you put it, start freelancing in areas where there is all sorts of grounds for various interpretations.
Sure. I wonder whether you agree or disagree with me, Joey, that this speaks volumes to the fundamental philosophical split at the heart of Johnson's government. The authoritarians who just don't think that the government should be telling folk what to do anywhere. The authoritarians who say if the government says it, you have to do it. Or the libertarians who say the Tory government shouldn't be telling people what to do. Well,
look, I think the actions of the Prime Minister and of people close to the Prime Minister give anyone, certainly yourself, Alastair, ample grounds for that suspicion. Now, I suspect the Prime Minister would say, no, we are guided by the science. We're absolutely pragmatic about trying to protect people. We're not, if you like, doctrinally driven. We're just trying to make sure that we do the right thing in terms of that balance between allowing people to live their lives as they wish to and protecting them against the virus. But the problem is that there are so many smoke signals that come out from Downing Street and from the Prime Minister himself that suggest that he hates these rules. I mean, for me, the problem is that he's not a good spokesman for these rules, because you can tell that it goes against every fibre of his body, and he goes out doing photo calls in a hospital, for goodness sake, not wearing a mask only a couple of weeks ago. So I think that does allow us to assume that although Boris Johnson is putting these sorts of things in place, he doesn't, or allows many people to assume that he doesn't really have his heart in it.
Yeah, fascinating. Final point, and very much with both of your former hats on, add to this debate argument the Christmas 2020 party story, and what are you left with? The media tilting at windmills, or a government that really, truly isn't functioning well?
For me, actually, the more corrosive issue is not confusion about what you should or shouldn't be doing under the mistletoe, because ultimately I think people will be guided by their own instincts rather than the Work and Pension Secretary. The more corrosive issue is how frequently the government has laid down firm rules, so legally binding rules that we're all told that we have to follow. And yet we've seen instances where people, Dominic Cummings obviously is the most central one, are perceived by 99% of the population as having broken them. And this Christmas party from a year ago has the sense that it might, I'm still not clear about whether or not this is going to run, but it might well feed into that narrative.
Joey Jones, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for sharing part of your evening with us. That's Joey Jones, former political correspondent with Sky, and Theresa May's former spokesman as well. Great guest. Now, frequently referred to as something of a state religion, the NHS can also be seen as a spoilt child. What it wants, it gets. But the public cry, hurrah! But might the record levels of funding finally be facing a challenge? The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak no less, says that the NHS must show signs of improvement before it gets more goodies. Its latest budget is £175 billion for a year. And now the Chancellor wants to see improved results, which means a cut in waiting lists and waiting times. But while some point to years of Tory austerity and underfunding causing the NHS's ill health, others say it is the structural inefficiency within the service which costs so much money. So it poses the question, are our public services underfunded or are they undermanaged and even poorly structured? I'm delighted to be joined now by Nigel Edwards, who's Chief Executive at the Nuffield Trust, a think tank specialising in health matters. Really good of you to join us this evening. The NHS has had more restructures and reorganisations than you can shake a stick at, but seldom, if ever, is it asked to prove value for money. Do you sense that's about to stop?
I sense that's not at all true, actually. The NHS has been subject to very substantial efficiency savings since Mrs Thatcher at a rate of 2 to 3% a year. So a bit of a historical perspective would help us here. I do sense a change in the mood. I suppose one thing I would say is that actually one of the problems the NHS has about productivity is that a massive underinvestment, largely the fault of the Treasury, which has left us with fewer diagnostic equipment, fewer pieces of diagnostic equipment, fewer hospital beds, fewer doctors than almost all of our Western European neighbours. And you know, there's a sort of mistake in the Treasury's mindset between efficiency and cheapness. And unfortunately, what we've got is something that is cheap and could be a lot more efficient. But paradoxically, to be more efficient, it would actually need more technology, more equipment. So it's a huge underinvestment. And that is at the door of the Treasury over the not just through the Conservative administration, but frankly, for the last 40 to 50 years. And probably also explains why our railways don't work and our roads have all got holes in them.
Let me take you back to the perfectly reasonable criticism you made of my introduction. I accept that there have been savings demanded here and there that often have been completely nonsensical, closures of wards and getting rid of staff. What I'm talking about is when the NHS says we need £5 billion to do X, seldom does that £5 billion come with a contract, as it would in the commercial sector, saying, yes, if you cure X number of people, save Y number of lives and do Z number of operations.
Again, that really just, this may be the impression that's been created, but actually, again, taking along the historical perspective of that during the Blair years with Michael Barber, for early parts of the coalition government, that, again, would not be true. In fact, the problem, again, is back to a short-termist approach to how this is managed and a concentration, and you rightly point out, on penny-wise, pound-foolish efficiency savings rather than really strategically thinking about how services need to change, and in particular a neglect of the workforce. You know, so it's very hard to get efficiency and real change if you haven't got the workforce on side. And I'm afraid, you know, there's severe signs that we've lost connection over the years with a substantial number of the people that we need to make change happen.
Incidentally, I saw your excellent exchange with Isabel Hardman on workforce and training earlier on, which I thoroughly recommend to anybody, which is there and available on Twitter. I think there's enough common ground between us for me to ask the next question, moving it on slightly. In your view and given your experience, is the NHS simply politically too powerful, or is it badly managed, badly led?
There's a whole set of really interesting questions in there. I personally think that the very close association of politicians with the day-to-day management of hospitals and healthcare, which is not something you see in most other developed countries, it has a pernicious and undermining effect on its effectiveness. I've referred to one of those problems, which is the dominance that it's given the Treasury. It also means that the jobs of leading it may be actually quite unattractive, particularly to clinicians. And you find more clinicians managing hospitals and other healthcare providers in other countries. I have to say, the evidence that it's poorly managed is not very strong. There's some very good top leaders, but unfortunately, they are forced to spend an awful lot of their time looking upwards for the lead of politicians. Again, something we don't see in other countries. So I'm afraid that we may have a slight lions led by donkeys problem. I'm not claiming NHS managers are lions and politicians are donkeys, but I'm not entirely sure the politicians really create an environment in which really good people can change and manage their services because of the insistent short-term nature of our political cycle, the short-termist nature of the way that the Treasury manage the money, and the tendency to respond very quickly, almost to knee-jerk issues, rather than what we would find in other European countries where people seem to take a more strategic view about how services are managed, and the politicians get much less involved in the operational details in the way that I think many people would welcome in this country.
Very fruitful conversation, Nigel. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm the first to be happy to be corrected on my analysis and then go on to discuss it openly and honestly, as I hope we both did. Good to see you, and thank you very much indeed. Nigel Edwards.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers from the Nuffield Trust. Now, after the break, where does the UK stand on the international scene, and how are those relations between Great Britain, the United Kingdom, and the United States? I'll be speaking with a former aide to Margaret Thatcher.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow, but further north, we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north. So these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland, and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving. So although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So although, again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away, and then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day, again, as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England, but some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink we have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The Entente has just got a whole lot less cordial. In the French equivalent of private eye, it has been reported that President Macron, in a private conversation, referred to Boris Johnson as a clown, a knucklehead, and having the attitude of a vulgarian. Last week, as both nations sought to respond to the drowning of 27 people in the Channel, the French president said our Prime Minister was not serious. Johnson had written a thoughtful, if contentious, series of proposals in letter form to Macron for consideration in the usual diplomatic way. But he then took to Twitter to share them, just in time for the first editions of the newspapers. Macron held a press conference and publicly pilloried the Prime Minister for this breach of protocol and to accuse him of not behaving seriously as people were drowning. Quote, "I am surprised by methods," said Macron, "when they are not serious. We do not communicate from one leader to another on these issues by tweets and letters that we make public." Well, with the addition of CLOWNGATE, the former French ambassador to the UK, Sylvie Berman, said relations between France and the UK had never been as bad since Waterloo. Well, joining me now is political consultant Emma Burnell. Emma, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. It was pretty crass of Johnson, as I said on this programme last week, to use Twitter to do diplomacy. But Macron's language takes things a bit lower, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it would do if they were public remarks intended to be released publicly. It's very difficult because you have to hold two ideas in your head at the same time. The fact that we all kind of think Boris Johnson is a bit of a clown. For some people, that's 100% why they love him. For some people, it's 100% why they are embarrassed by him. But that's his shtick. He's the clown on the zip wire. So you have to hold that idea in your head whilst also knowing that it's not the most diplomatic of language that could be used. And perhaps Macron should not be referring to Boris in this way. Certainly, he never should have done it in a way that gets public.
Absolutely. I remember someone in Arkansas telling me about Bill Clinton when he was in the deepest doo-doo imaginable, why they were re-electing him. And he said to me, when we elected him, we knew he was a bum, but he's our bum. There is a kind of possession, and the Brits don't mind saying these things about their leaders, but they do not like it when a foreign leader says it of them.
Yeah, and I think that's true of any diplomacy. We get to say about our guys what you don't. And it's worth remembering, and I think it's worth the people who dislike Boris Johnson, and particularly who dislike him over European issues, remembering that Macron is a politician too, with an election to win. And just as in the UK, there's no harm in any British politician bashing the French, the same is reciprocally true. So, yeah, this is not going to do Macron any harm with his own voters.
The reality, and you're an expert on these matters because you're a political consultant, is that post-Brexit, business matters, I mean, not least in Northern Ireland right now. Migration matters, not least in the English Channel right now. These two have got to grow up and get on with that, haven't they?
They have to grow up and get on with it. I don't think that will happen at the moment. Macron probably has the longer-term ability to change his behaviour, but he has got an election coming up and he's going to act according to his immediate political needs. And that will mean giving no quarter, particularly on terms like of the Calais crossing, all of that stuff. There is just as strong a political wind in France about this as there is in Britain. Equally, Boris Johnson's shtick is to bumble and misbehave. and to play hardball and to send David Frost, his chief Brexit negotiator, in to play hardball and to sound tough. And as long as these are the things that are working for them, both domestically, on the political front, it still gets them the kind of headlines they are looking to garner, then the actual important work that needs to happen underneath will be secondary, unfortunately.
Yeah. If you were in number 10 now, what would you advise Johnson to do? Because they've put out a very formal, creaky little statement saying relationships with France and Monsieur Macron are as good as they've ever been, full stop, close quotes. Would you say, yes, that's the right thing to do, or should Macron or should Johnson come out and say a little more about it?
No, I think, to be honest, as it wasn't a public remark, I think that Johnson's best bet is just shrugging it off. C'est la vie. Maybe he could shrug it off in French. I think that Johnson's at his best when he's being charming. And so maybe what he could do is actually turn around and try and charm Macron. And in some ways embarrass him by being the bigger, better figure. If Macron is seen as less serious than Boris Johnson, that then could be a domestic problem for him.
Sure. The final point, and it's not what the team talked to you about when they invited you to come and have this conversation, but I've just had an intriguing conversation with Joey Jones, who used to work for Sky. You knew him very well, I'm sure, when he was at Sky, and of course worked for Theresa May in number 10, on the mixed signals over Christmas festivities. And Joey said ministers really have got to hang together, but at the moment there is quite a profound disagreement in Downing Street between the sort of the authoritarian dictators who say, do this and don't do that, and the libertarians who say, really, just let the people do what they want to do. What would your advice and guidance be to the Prime Minister on that particular question?
Again, I agree with Joe. They've got to pick a lane and stick to it. Now, I like you, side slightly more on the authoritarian side. The reason I'm speaking to you from home is because I have COVID at the moment and am self-isolating. Thankfully, my symptoms are very mild, not least, I am sure, because I'm double jabbed. I was due to have my booster next week. That's obviously had to be pushed back. But the public messaging is all over the place. And it's really difficult because, I'm an intelligent woman, I hope, and I don't know exactly what the rules are around my office Christmas party. I don't think anybody does. And I think unless we actually see uniformity, and that's what really matters, is the government leading by example in a uniform way that makes it just really rigidly clear. If a picture tells 1,000 words, then what does it show us when half of the House of Commons aren't wearing a mask, for example? I just think they've got to get an absolute grip on this and make it clear, make it plain, make it simple and make it easy, and give us all a nice, calm Christmas that we deserve. After the last year we've had, we need that.
100% agree. And I didn't know about you having tested positive. I thank you very much, doubly thank you for joining us this evening. And do
It's been lovely to put makeup on for the first time in a week.
Tell me about it. Emma Burnell, thank you very much indeed. Great to see you, and get well soon.
Thank you.
Emma Burnell, the political consultant there. Now, in an exclusive interview with GBNews, the former United States President Donald Trump claimed that one of the first moves of Joe Biden as president was to remove a bust of Sir Winston Churchill from the White House. So, where do the UK and the US stand in their relationship? I found it particularly interesting that Trump also said that he fears an invasion of Taiwan from China. He says it comes after the current MI6 chief Richard Moore warned that the Chinese government is growing militarily in strength, and Taiwan and several British companies are helping that country build submarines in the event of an invasion. Trump said it wouldn't have happened in his time, and now China is talking quite openly about it. Well, with me in the studio now, I'm delighted to say, is Niall Gardiner, director of the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom. He served as an aide to Lady Thatcher and advised her on a number of international policy issues. It's really great to see you.
It's great to see you, Alastair. Thank you very much for having me on the show today.
Team had a chat with you about what we wanted to talk about, but it's one of those things that are very, very fluid. And I stress the point that you worked for Margaret for so long. on the foreign affairs brief guiding her and what have you. But when you see something like CLOWNGATE, as I've called it, and Macron saying, you know, he's a clown and he's a vulgarian and what have you, and Johnson using Twitter to try and do diplomacy over migration, does your heart bleed?
Well, I have to say that it's a bit rich of Emmanuel Macron to be calling Boris Johnson a clown. After all, Macron is one of the most unpopular French presidents, of modern times. And I think, Macron has been a spectacular failure as the French president. And clearly he's doing all this saber rattling to distract from his own domestic failures, actually. And I do think that Boris Johnson is doing a far better job than Emmanuel Macron. So rather pathetic posturing from the French president, as usual. I'd imagine that, probably judging by the opinion polls, most French people think that Macron is a clown, actually. So he should be looking at his own constituency in terms of the language he's using.
I think we can park that one there quite nicely, and thank you. Let's talk about what we did say that we wanted to discuss, and that is that Johnson politely criticised Joe Biden over the Afghan withdrawal, and Biden, in effect, implied that the United States were less keen on such nation-building foreign interventions. Is that good news for the United Kingdom or a real worry?
I think it should be a real worry when you have a president like Joe Biden, who has been so dismally awful, actually, on the world stage. This is a president who, during his campaign, boasted that America would be back under his leadership. The reality is the United States is a superpower in decline under Biden. And the Afghanistan...
And in reverse, almost.
Yes.
Consciously in reverse.
The Afghanistan withdrawal was a huge, utter disaster. It was a catastrophe for the free world. And Biden threw US allies under the bus, including the United Kingdom. And the whole Afghanistan debacle, I think, has been, a huge scar for the United States on the international stage. I do think that Biden has been perhaps the most, spectacular failure on the international stage as a US president, even worse than Barack Obama a few years ago. After all, Obama boasted of leading from behind. It's actually even worse with Joe Biden. This is a president who really is driving US decline. He's heading the most left-wing US presidency that we have seen in the modern era. He's also a president, frankly, who pays very little attention to the US-UK special relationship, starting off, of course, throwing a bust of Winston Churchill out of the Oval Office. I mean, who does that? I mean, that's hugely insulting to America's closest friend and ally. And I would say there's a lot of tension behind the scenes between Downing Street and the White House on a number of issues, including, of course, most recently, the Northern Ireland Protocol.
That was going to be my next question, given that very eloquent lead up to that point. Nevertheless, as I said to Emma and to Joey, Boris Johnson has to do business with this guy. Forget migration just for a moment, but quite specifically on Northern Ireland. And for a number of businesses right now, this very evening in Northern Ireland, this is make or break time. And Biden is being more partisan than I can remember perhaps since the Kennedys.
Well, the Biden administration is knifing Britain in the back on the Northern Ireland issue, as it has done on several other issues. This is a very intensely anti-Brexit administration. There are advisors around the president who absolutely loathe Brexit, who don't like Boris Johnson at all, who don't like, the strength of the special relationship, and they're actively undermining what's happening at the moment. And it is absolutely outrageous for a US president to be lecturing Britain over Northern Ireland, actually. This is a hugely insulting intervention. This is a matter for the British people to decide. But basically, you have a president who is parroting the talking points of the European Commission. After all, the EU has a big embassy in Washington. They're feeding, frankly, a lot of poisonous, content, actually, to the White House.
And I butt in merely to say, you're a man who lived in this world for so long and still do. When you say parroting the talking points, you mean, in effect, the brief that comes from Brussels for those who are going to speak publicly to this subject.
Yes, if you look at what the White House is saying on Northern Ireland and on Brexit, it's identical to what the European Commission is putting out. It's just poisonous propaganda. And it is absolutely outrageous that you have a US president lecturing the United Kingdom on British policy. The president needs to mind his own business. And the same goes, of course, for a significant number of Democratic senators in Congress who are also issuing all kinds of threats and warnings to the UK. This is completely unacceptable, and Boris Johnson needs to stand up to Joe Biden.
How worried are you, and the clock is against us, we could talk all night, and I'd love to, but there we are, about China, because in that conversation between Nigel Farage and Trump, tellingly, I mean, I thought it was the standout point in the conversation where Trump said China wouldn't have been talking openly about invading Taiwan when I was in the White House. They are now talking openly about it, and we're helping Taiwan build a fleet of new submarines and what have you.
Yes.
I mean, it strikes me as being profoundly worrying right now.
It is. And that was a tremendous interview last night, actually, with Donald Trump. And, you know, I have to say that when Trump was in the White House, you didn't have China threatening to invade Taiwan. The Chinese see weakness in the White House today because Joe Biden is an extraordinarily weak-kneed president, in fact, the most weak-kneed president that we've seen in a very long time. And the Chinese, you know, sense US weakness, and they are becoming increasingly aggressive as a result. And I think that, you know, President Trump certainly was 100% right in warning the free world about the dangers posed by communist China. China's flexing its muscles today. We need to stand with the people of Taiwan against Beijing. This is an incredibly dangerous moment on the world stage when you have a declining US superpower and you have both the Chinese and the Russians becoming increasingly assertive and aggressive.
Niall Gardiner, great to see you, and thank you
pleasure.
very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you very much, Alastair.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Niall Gardiner there, who used to work for Margaret Thatcher and now runs a foundation bearing her name on foreign policy issues with some profound and, I hope you agree, fascinating thoughts on relationships between the United Kingdom and the United States and other matters. After the break, from the Maldives to Loch Lomond, the story of a rescued and now hopefully happy turtle.
On Dan Wootton tonight, as the man found guilty of killing British student Meredith Kercher walks free, the woman at the heart of one of the most infamous murder trials of the millennium, Amanda Knox, sits down for an exclusive interview to talk moving on, motherhood, reclaiming her identity, and whether doubts about her innocence will ever truly disappear. Plus, Robert Jobson reflects on a big week of change and controversy for the royal family. And I'll break down the day's top stories with my superstar panel, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the journalist and author Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
One of the BBC's greats, whether reporting or presenting news, Michael Burke, has also presented Radio 4's The Moral Maze programme for more than 30 years. Michael has said that freedom of speech is seriously under threat at the BBC. He said that the corporation was falling victim to woke ideology, and its editorial choices reflected that. Puts it at odds with its Middle England listeners, he suggested. Burke also said that social media sites like Twitter were poisoning public debate. Grist to the mill, therefore, of my next guest, former Moral Maze regular, and now I'm delighted to say fellow GB News presenter Andrew Doyle. Quote two of those bits back to you. Michael Burke says free speech is under threat at the BBC, and as we said on this programme last week, Ofcom, the regulator, says the BBC must try harder on impartiality.
Right.
Tricky games, tricky times for Auntie.
Absolutely, and he's not wrong. Michael Burke is 100% right about all of this. He's just having the guts to say it out loud, you know, and it's difficult for someone within the organisation, presumably, to criticise his own organisation. But of course, he's such a veteran, he's so established that he's in the position to do so. And he did this in an interview with the Radio Times. And he's talked about how the BBC is, I mean, he didn't use this word quite, but it is systemically woke, if we're going to use the word woke to describe this thing.
And is that in the selection of subjects they debate? Because it's a great programme, and as I said, you did it for a long time, or the guests that they have, or what?
Well, the Moral Maze actually is, and I think this is what he's alluding to, the Moral Maze is the last bastion of that kind of cut and thrust of debate, that last free speech sort of area within Radio 4. And what he's saying is that he thinks that its time is almost over, or that there's an insinuation of that. But yeah, I mean, he's saying that it used to be more robust. People, you know, used to treat the audience like adults. In other words, you know, you might hear an opinion you dislike.
Voltaire. Yes.
You're right, exactly, quite.
Absolutely.
But
I hate what you say, but I would die to give you your right to say it.
Exactly. I mean, what was great about the Moral Maze, what I enjoyed the most about it, is you could have a complete disagreement, quite a robust disagreement with someone, and then go and have a drink afterwards with them, and it's fine. So it's about that idea of being able to disagree and not take it personally.
But the other thing that strikes me, and it's quite profound, and that is that, in a sense, Ofcom's point about impartiality, in my view, impartiality is all about having both views.
Absolutely.
Even if one of you say, some people will find it repugnant, and lo and behold, other people will find the other one repugnant.
Right.
If you hear both and are given the liberty to make your own blooming mind up, that's impartial.
But the problem is that there is one side of this debate who believe that disagreement of a certain kind is tantamount to violence, is tantamount to making them feel unsafe. This is the thing you get from activists all the time, particularly through social media. So he's right to identify that social media is part of the problem here. You know, if I say to my employer, someone disagreed with me at work, they'll say, well, that's not my issue. If I say, I now feel unsafe because of someone's opinions at work, then it becomes something that they are obliged to act upon. And that's what he's talking about, is actually there are certain topics that the Moral Maze will cover that are quite contentious, shall we say. And if you delve into those subjects, as the programme is meant to do and has a sort of obligation to do, the response these days is different. So online they'll have people saying, you shouldn't even be talking about this. Yes. You shouldn't even have raised this issue.
When we were talking outside, and I walked away from you because I had to come and put my makeup on, what have you, a thought crossed my funny little mind, and that is, in a sense, it is called the Moral Maze because that's exactly what it is. Yes. It is not called the moral slam dunk for one side of the argument.
No. I mean, what's so great about it is they do make an effort to bring in all sides. The programme doesn't work unless you hear all sides because of the way it is structured. Yeah. You know, you have two panellists on one side, two on the other, and witnesses on either side, and that's what's great about it.
The other thing, though, again, which I find slightly confusing, when he says, you know, Twitter is it's a cesspit, is that because it publishes things that people disagree with, or because it blocks and spikes people with whom it doesn't agree?
It's partly the nature of the format is that you have to communicate your ideas in a very concise way, which lends itself to just the short slam dunk style or even abusive style. It also invites people to curate their own echo chambers where they're not really engaging with other points of view. And also, the more antagonistic you are on Twitter or any other social media sites, the more likely you are to be retweeted, reposted. You get all the likes, and this is very appealing for people. It's almost addictive. You know, when you write a tweet that goes viral, and it's because you've been a bit antagonistic antagonistic in it, you might do that again because you want those likes and retweets again.
Yeah.
It's built into the system actually to generate conflict, and that's not the best way to have. That's why you need these long-form debates, like we have on GB News, like they do in the Moral Maze, where you sit down and you thrash the ideas out. And what you realise is you're dealing with human beings, not just an avatar on Twitter. So you don't just monster them and dehumanise them. You actually engage with them as a human being and respect that. Okay, this is someone who sees the world different from me. But that doesn't make them evil.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and I warn you of that because I know the answer may be quite extensive.
Right.
But in that sense, the GP, Adrian Harrop, is a classic example of that.
Sure.
To understand why he is currently in difficulty with Twitter, you need to understand why he's currently in difficulty with J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
And you need to understand why he got into trouble over that.
Yes, well, what I could say is he's a GP who has been suspended for 1 month for professional misconduct, for sending abusive tweets and intimidatory tweets online, because he compared J.K. Rowling, this is just one example, he compared J.K. Rowling to Jimmy Savile, saying that she shouldn't be left around children because of her views on gender identity, which is such an absurd, ridiculous reach. He's also known for sending abusive tweets to people because, again, he thinks that anyone who disagrees with him is transphobic, hateful, evil, rather than sitting in a room talking with people and realising they just have a different point of view than him. So it's a very sad story. And of course, if you're in a profession like the medical profession, which is a regulated profession, you do have a responsibility to online and the way you behave online, not to bring the profession into disrepute. It was found that he has brought the profession into disrepute. It's not a permit, it's 1 month suspension. But absolutely, that's a perfect example of someone who's in a sort of highly regarded profession who online suddenly behaves like a teenager, suddenly behaves like a child with a grudge and degrades, to be honest, himself more than anyone else.
Andrew Doyle, always a pleasure to talk to you, both outside before the programme and inside in the warmth of the studio.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you very shortly on air. Thank you. Now, this next one's a bit of a shell shocker. Oh, I'm so sorry, I apologise profusely for that, but I did say to Daniel, yes, you can put that phrase in. It's all about a turtle named April, who has been transported 5,000 miles from the Maldives over to Loch Lomond in Scotland. April, and that is the name of the turtle, by the way, managed to get herself caught in some netting and a plastic bag. Her rescuers concluded that her injuries prevented her from returning to the wild, and so thanks to the Sea Life Trust, she has now been resettled in her new home in Scotland. And I am delighted to be joined by the General Manager at Sea Life Loch Lomond, KATHRYN Angel. And there she is. KATHRYN, call me old-fashioned, but if I grew up in the Maldives and enjoyed those waters, I might find Loch Lomond a bit nippy.
Yeah, traditionally you would. However, here at the Sea Life Centre, we're in the tropical area at the moment, so April's in 26 degrees of water, so she's quite comfortable compared to what she would be in the Maldives.
Fantastic. And what people will all want to know is how are the injuries? Is she now fully mended and recovered from that ghastly netting and plastic bag?
She is recovered, however, she's not able to be released back into the wild. She's got an amputated front fib and she's also got lung tears, so she's unable to dive down in the water. So she's unable to catch fish and fight off any predators. So that's why she's here at the Sea Life Centre in Loch Lomond in her new forever home.
I was going to say, so without being morbid at all, she's with you for the long run?
She is, yeah. She can't be released back into the wild because she just wouldn't survive. She was in a temporary turtle rehabilitation centre while she was recovering from her injuries. So she's going to be with us now, long term, and she needs full-time care, which the animal care team here can provide for her.
Yeah, we were just looking at some pictures of her in her earlier existence before coming to you. But are they a little bit like tortoises in the sense that the long term can be a case of the emphasis being very much on the long?
Yes, long term, they can live up to 100 years. So she's 5, we believe that she's about 5 years old, so she's got a long life to live out with us here at the Sea Life Centre.
I love what you do, and sadly there is great demand for it. But KATHRYN, thank you very much indeed. Sorry we had a little technical hiccup at the beginning, but we got there and I'm delighted we did. And from all of us at GB News, love to you and love to April. Thank you very much indeed. What a great story to end on. That is it from me tonight, from Joe Biden to turtles, goodness me. Next up, Dan Wootton. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow, but further north we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north, so these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland, and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving, so although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So, although again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away. And then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day, again, as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England. But some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.